that we must avoid the pitfalls of national consciousness at a time when it was very difficult to figure out our path towards independence. This current administration, under the leadership of President Julius Maada Bio, is committed to defining a national agenda, and the President has already announced the setting up of a commission on cohesion and peace precisely to address some of the challenges in the report. We should be aware that Sierra Leone is not unique in this regard. Other countries have gone through this experience, and we are in a position to learn from their experience, how they escaped from the fragility trap. Today, we are lucky to have excellent speakers with hands-on experiences with us. And so this is as much a presentation of report as an experience sharing exercise to make sure that we leave here with a call to action, that this report is not going to gather dust, and that it will guide the foundation of public policy in all aspects of our work as a government. Ladies and gentlemen, this event offers a great opportunity to examine the sources of fragility, as I noted, reflect on them, and begin to think about how to address them right now, not later. As the chairman, I look forward to the presentations, and I strongly encourage participants not to be shy, and let's actually have an honest, frank discussion. That is what is expected of all of us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, as the chairman, I now have the honor to invite all of you to pay attention and to listen to those who are coming to get to the heart of the discussion. Without further delay, I would like to call on the Executive Director of the IGC for opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, Your Excellencies, Honourable Ministers, Honourable Parliamentarians and distinguished guests and friends, it's a great privilege to be here. It's a great honour to be working with the government in this area and on this event. Let me start by just sharing two facts about why what we're talking about today is so important, why what we're talking about today is a challenge for the world. It's a global challenge. It's a challenge for Africa. It's a challenge for the region, and it's a challenge for Sierra Leone. There are 65 million people today who have fled their homes, either internally displaced or displaced outside their borders. That's the highest number of people since 1945. By 2030, half of the world's poor will live in fragile states. Almost 80% of those in extreme poverty will do so. So increasingly, fragility is at the heart of the challenge of development that faces individual countries, that faces regions, that faces Africa, and that faces the world. The International Growth Centre, which is based at the London School of Economics and is a partnership with Oxford University, has since 2008 engaged with partners in countries across Africa, in the Middle East and in Asia, engaging in a range of issues surrounding fragility and its implications for growth and for development. Over that period, we've commissioned hundreds of projects aimed at helping individual countries to understand their particular challenges and possible policy solutions. Increasingly, we've become aware of the need to work with our partner countries as neutral, independent partners based at international universities and bringing in top economists from a range of universities around the world to help our partners strengthen their evidence-based policy with a focus on building pathways out of fragility. And at the heart of that is a significant degree of humility, because one of the lessons that we have drawn from working with so many countries is that those pathways are different for each country. There's no single solution that countries can follow that will ensure a pathway to resilience. That countries must identify themselves the sources of legitimacy and of accountability that exist and can be built on, the challenges to those and where those can be addressed. Very importantly, one of the key themes of this report, the Commission's report, is that approaches to work have to be bottom-up. They have to be bottom-up in a couple of ways. They have to be bottom-up in the sense that they have to be realistic, starting from where we are, not just aiming where we want to be. But they also have to be bottom-up in the sense of being cognizant of local priorities. And I mean local there both in the sense of national priorities for the country, but also priorities in the regions, and local priorities in that sense, which often can create one of the key building blocks to escape the fragility trap. The Fragility Commission was set up a year ago, March 2017. It was chaired by David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of the UK, and co-chaired by Dr. Kaberuka, former President of the African Development Bank, and Adnan Khan, a colleague of mine at the International Growth Center. And its intellectual academic leaders were Paul Collier and Tim Besley. And they brought together a set of commissioners which drew both from academia and from practitioners in business, in politics, and in other sectors. And the idea was to bring together the best current research, the best understanding we have academically of the root causes of fragility, with practical experience about what steps, what policy steps, what practical steps have worked in practice as countries chart their own path out of fragility. Part of the recognition that successful strategies are bottom-up strategies led to a realization that it was very important to have individual studies in individual countries to accompany the international report. And today we'll focus on both the international report, which Dr. Kaberuka will present, and the case study that was done of Sierra Leone, which was authored by Herbert McLeod, the IGC country director here in Sierra Leone, and Brian Gasson. So we're very pleased today to be able to engage you in both a discussion of what we've learned internationally about pathways out of fragility, but also what we've learned and some initial ideas in terms of pathways that may be important here in Sierra Leone. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Let me reiterate the chair's invitation to all of you to participate in this discussion. The point of this event is really to engage in a genuine discussion, and the program is designed to encourage that. So we look forward to engaging with you, and I want just once again to welcome you here. Thank you.
So much. And now I call on someone that I've known for a very long time, and I have to situate it in a historical context. When I was a student activist a long time ago at Fuabe College and found myself later on in Ghana, I ran into her, also escaping from Liberia. So we had a good experience together. Went to the University of Ghana, Legon, and somehow we managed to move on with our lives. And somehow, miraculously, we now find ourselves in the roles that we play. I guess that is destiny. It gives me the honor now to call on the Secretary General of the Mano River Union,
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister of Foreign Affairs. Her Excellency, the former President of Liberia, Mrs. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Honorable Dr. Donald Kaberuka, former President of the African Development Bank, distinguished ministers and members of the High Table, Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, and the United Nations Resident Coordinator and Development Partners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, standing on existing protocols, allow me to express my appreciation to the International Growth Center, and particularly to Mr. Herbert McLeod for inviting me and the MRU to participate in the launch of the Global Fragility Report entitled Escaping the Fragility Trap, which aims at presenting a new approach in addressing the problems of fragility and the case study of Sierra Leone, host country of the Mana River Union. As you may be aware, when it comes to the elements, all the elements which account for state fragility, we can say that they are all present in the MRU. Using the fragility lenses, the MRU sub-region over the past decade has gone through some of the most disruptive civil crises and the attending consequences of war. The story is made short that just as some of these economies and political systems began to normalize and witness double-digit economic growth rates, in came Ebola. This pandemic hit 3 of the 4 member states, thereby bringing to naught all the efforts made by member states, thus putting those countries back in a bigger state of fragility. Ours is not a story of despair. We are amongst some of the most resilient and hopeful peoples. And thanks to the international community and partners for their support, which have assisted MRU member states in gaining gradual steps in strengthening the quality of governance, expanding economic opportunities, and somehow putting efforts on the improvement of of basic social services. We can see these baby steps as walking away from fragility. We welcome this report as a signpost, an amber light, a research tool to encourage the shift and refocus of governments to take a critical look at and see what it takes to walk away from fragility. Additionally, there is a need for more attention to be given to the socio-political, economic, and environmental dimensions which should rightfully address by creating a strategic regional approach that will take into consideration local nuances and ownership from the community to the national level. Failure to address these factors might add uneven socio-economic pressures which could weaken our resilience, thereby keeping member states in a perpetual state of fragility. The geopolitical space of the MRU is covered by Mali, Guinea-Bissau, and Burkina Faso. In part, what goes on out there makes it more of an imperative to review fragility from a broader regional perspective. We are certain that when our neighbor's house is on fire, we need to help with even just one bucket of water. We have begun the quiet but most active form of preventive diplomacy with engagements of our leaders on those internal dynamics that portend danger to political stability and which threatens the social contract between the governed and their governments. The new wave of regional security threat, which is a strong driver of fragility, has serious negative impacts on our sub-region and needs some ardent attention. In order to address this situation, more focus should be given to the border communities, taking into consideration the porosities of our land borders and the intense and continuous movement of people. In this regard, the MRU, with its mandate to address regional peace and security under its 15th protocol has attempted to help address the situation from escalating by establishing approximately 38 joint border security and confidence building units. The purpose for establishing these units is to help identify cross-border crimes as well as mitigate in some minor cross-border disputes. We are carving a niche for peace in economic development and regional integration. We further welcome these reports and offer to convene under the authorities of heads of state the Ministerial Council of Finance and Planning Ministers to give further relevance to this report as a development tool, and taking a page from Dr. Kaberuka's experience he outlined yesterday, we hope we can come out with a short list on MRU's homegrown socioeconomic and political responses to take further steps away from fragility. Walking away from fragility as a region, we believe, is a good backward step to help us positively make stride towards governance, peace, and development. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. I'm not surprised, because even those days, over 30 years ago now, so we still look young, right? Yes, I'm talking about way back. I guess we started it a long time ago. Ladies and gentlemen, it now gives me the pleasure to call on our keynote speaker, a brother, a friend who has been part of our journey to not only define the new direction, but to build an architecture around its delivery. That we journeyed through the length and breadth of this country in very difficult circumstances, often figuring out where the networks for phone calls would work and where would have to be without connections. But somehow we managed to convince the majority of voters in this country that the new direction was the right direction for the Republic of Sierra Leone. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome here the Minister of Finance, the JJ himself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Ali Kabar, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Let me start by saying I was not destined to deliver the keynote address. I had to do it for some reasons. Unavoidably, His Excellency President Julius Madabio could be making up for some reasons. So to start with, let me say apologies for that from State House. But as a senior government official, I had to step in. So pardon me if I did not tell you what you want to hear. But under any circumstance, I think I will tell you something you will enjoy, you will like to hear. The developmental state clues from the past and new directions to the future. In the past 3 decades, significant achievements have been made in reducing extreme poverty and under-5 mortality, increased access to basic education and clean water in many parts of the world, and somehow, including Sierra Leone, though not as fast as others have done in other parts of the sub-Saharan Africa. Notwithstanding, there is much more to do, as almost 900 million people are still living on less than $2 a day. In many parts of the world's poorest countries, infant and maternal mortality rates are very high. continue to be high, though they will be declining. Access to clean water and electricity is still a major challenge. The societies in such countries are trapped in a syndrome of interlocking vicious cycles, making it harder to make sustained progress. State fragility has been the cause and consequence of some of the major challenges, including extreme poverty, mass migration, terrorism, and the like, facing the world. Promoting inclusive growth and resilience in conflict situations are key priorities for sustainable development. In many of the world's poorest countries, the states lack the capacity to perform basic functions such as service delivery, guaranteeing citizen security and the rule of law, efficient taxation, and failing infrastructure. This is largely due to the fact that many public officials are not motivated by a sense of national purpose to perform their mandated functions, but instead abuse their position for personal gains with impunity, quite apart from the structural rigidities that characterize these economies. Under such circumstances, it is not strange to find a poorly performing private sector, paying low incomes with high unemployment rates, in turn surrendering weak government revenues, thus exposing the countries to both political and economic shocks, which often reverse the gains made at the end of the day. Paradoxically, in such conditions, we find a flourishing island of conspicuous consumption populated by those in power, who succeed in manipulating either ethnic or regional population, using ill-gotten gains to perpetuate their stay in power. That was the wrong direction. It's definitely not part of the new direction. Sierra Leone has made considerable strides and significant progress in 3 areas. We've been able to bring home and sustain peace since the end of the war in 2002. Allow me, Mr. Chairman, Her Excellency, Dr. Sirleaf, to recognize the presence and the architect of peace, one of the architects of peace in this room, former Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Honorable Solomon Ekumabera. We can't talk about peace without reference to him. He was the chair negotiator of the Oloma Peace Accord. He was the Attorney General by then. He brokered the peace. He divided the peace. He set up the special courts. He set up the TRCs and saw all the processes through. So if we're talking about peace without reference to him, particularly in his presence, that would be unpardonable crime. So, Honorable Solomon Ekumabera, thank you very much. We've been able to sustain peace since the end of the war in 2002. We've conducted 5 general elections, and in 2 instances, we were peaceful transition to the opposition. Despite these gains, there are still elements of economic mismanagement, weak state institutions, elements of ethnicity and tribalism, which have the potential to undermine our peace. Many reports, studies, books, and analysis have been completed. They all attempt to describe, explain, or prescribe solutions for our seemingly permanent predicament. Yet, the recent events suggest that we have not made much headway. The 2 reports to be presented may well provide the basis for national conversation which we must have. At the very least, we should begin the discussion on the following. What are the strengths of our culture and our polity that we have stifled, yet which continue to endure? Where have we tried to build something new on a broken foundation and thus failed even when we honestly tried? What are the traps that, if we don't change direction, will frustrate us again? What will the new path, consistent with the social and political structures that have, despite everything, kept us resilient? There are a few questions. Let me go over them again. As I said, we must start discussion, frank national conversation on the following areas. What are the strengths of our culture and our polity that we have stifled, yet we continue to endure? Where have we tried to build something new on a broken foundation and thus failed, even when we honestly tried? What are the traps that, if we don't change direction, will frustrate us again? What will the new path, consistent with the social and political structure that have, despite everything, kept us resilient, be like? The usual response to the question why past effort have failed is that the absence of political will. We are here because we are determined to provide the political will needed to chart a new path. But we must be sure that the new path is the correct path. We must get the entire country to embrace a national agenda rather than a political agenda. We want to persuade our development partners to rally around our agenda. That's the new direction. Our government remains committed to peace, national cohesion, and sustainable development. We recognize that challenges are enormous, but not unsurmountable. We will not witch hunt, but we will hunt the witches wherever they are. We recognize that lasting peace, national cohesion, and inclusiveness require a developmental state. Now that we know why we are here, where we are, thanks to the report and other analysis, what shall we do about it? Should we revisit the TRC report for clues? Or do we get back on progress with TRCs? Are there lessons out there we can learn from? Where do we find our strength to begin to erect the building blocks? What type of intervention should government and development partners undertake to ensure resilient and sustainable growth and development? How do we coordinate our interventions to avoid duplication? The population is impatient. The challenges are daunting and urgent, but sustainable solutions are needed. It's against this background that we are working towards establishing a commission on peace and national cohesion. A blueprint is being developed to guide the process. I'm sure the findings in the fragility reports, both the global and the Sierra Leone case study, with the report of this meeting will be useful input for the commission. I therefore encourage participants to be frank and committed to these discussions. Be assured of my government support to reveal the outcome of the discussions today, and we look forward to receiving the reports of this event. On that note, Mr. Chairman, Her Excellency, former President of the Republic of Liberia, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased on behalf of His Excellency, President Julius Maada Bio, to formally launch the report titled The Underlying Causes of Fragility and Instability in Sierra Leone. The underlying causes of fragility and instability in Sierra Leone.
forgot my early morning exercise today, so I'm doing that. So it's deliberate. I have to work here. Thank you so much, my colleague Minister of Finance. I think you've laid out the framework of the new direction and our commitment to tackling the root causes of fragility. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me pleasure to call on someone who is also part of our effort here to make the Truth and Reconciliation Commission work. I want to give him a few minutes to share his experience with us, that Bishop Joseph Humper. This way.
Chairman, honorable ladies and gentlemen, members present, I greet you all in the name of our Maker, Jesus Christ, Allah. Let me first of all apologize for coming in late. As a teacher, I beat my students for coming in late. And now I'll fall a victim of it. No excuses. I'm late and I'm sorry for coming in now. What I want to share with you, you will help me to elaborate on it or to step there. Yesterday, I went to the hospital and the doctor declared me unfit to speak in public because I cannot see well. Nevertheless, and I want to say this, if you want to know what you want to know about the TRC in Sierra Leone, you ask questions. That way I will not be looking on paper to talk, because I have some of the ideas here. I want to welcome our brothers and sisters who have come here to learn more about our TRC, and I do hope that they will take the little we share with them to go and do something with it in their part of the country. I would also want to ask that if I speak too long, you scratch your throat, I will know that I'm getting longer and longer here. I don't understand. And then I will wind up. Then you may not hesitate to ask questions, but what I'll say here, in that way I'll be able to dilate on what I'll be saying here, or what I will not be saying, that you may interest you. The TRC in Sierra Leone we all know came as a result of a double that befell this nation. And probably one man taking lead to say that I will stand, quote unquote, for the people, although he was standing for himself. May his soul rest in peace. If he took the peace from here to where he's gone. The government puts together some people to dig out the question why this demise, why the war, so to speak. What went wrong in Sierra Leone from independence to date, and what needs to be corrected? How can we learn from what we have gone through? To answer that question, the government put together a team which, fortunately and unfortunately, I was called to head. We traveled around the country. We did not sit in Freetown and call people. We went to where they were, all around the country. And everywhere we went, one name came out loudly, that it was Foodies and quote unquote, say peace where you are. But he left a history. It was he who brought this war. And he wanted to bring a change in Sierra Leone, a change in governance, a change in our way of living, a change in the way we do things. Probably he did not read well to know how to bring about a change in the country, but he went to the bush. And all around the country, he took able-bodied young men and women to join him in that. I will be sharing just 1/10 of it with you, and if you ask questions, probably more percentage will come out of that, because I do not want to keep us here endlessly. And it also reminds me of a young man who just graduated from college and he was asked to speak. The introduction took him 45 minutes. And then he took another 20 minutes introducing himself. Before he came to the subject matter, people were all snoring. And one bold young man came forward and said, Mr. Speaker, if you are through with your long speaking, you close the doors, we are going. I don't want to give you that chance here. And so if I hear, I understand that I'm way beyond my limit, and I will summarize. Ladies and gentlemen, I have not come to reactivate your thoughts about the war in Sierra Leone, but our brothers and sisters are here to know how we are able to come together again through the TRC. It's just a summary I'm giving, and there's more that we want to hear. You ask a question, and I assure you that I will not stay long here. My profession calls for talking. I was a teacher by profession, a minister of religion by profession. The two, put them together. All right. Good. I have 2 minutes to speak. Is that it? I've already completed my 2 minutes. But thank you very much for reminding me. Then I will not look in script. The TRC came as a result of a Dumburu that failed this country, led by Freetown. And the government thought that the only way to get around this one, to know why this, was to set up the TRC, to go from place to place to ask questions, to ask people. And indeed, all key people in the chiefdom or in the country came either through our sessions or through our individual meeting. We did not go as a team claiming to know everything that went wrong. We were able to get from people what had gone wrong from their own experience from independence to now in this country, and why we are what we are. We collected those in all the districts, and people cooperated with us. He said it is not for us, and we are not coming to find causes to arrest people that you are responsible. The only people who arrested him, the only person who arrested himself was Freetown, because he came out to say, I'm the leader. From place to place, we talk about the political situation from independence to now, the economy, the social integration, the life people are living, especially the young people. The young people who are conscripted by Freetown came on board because they wanted quick fix. They wanted money, they wanted to be recognized. Not that it was their way to do so, but they wanted to be recognized. And indeed, the government of Sierra Leone, at the end of our report, just a few statements, we did not write all, but we produced 4 volumes. So you see, as I stand before you, with 4 volumes produced, result of TRC, I would encourage my brothers and sisters who have come to see if they can lay hand on that volume, or 1 or 2. Otherwise, what I'll be saying here will not mean much to you, and you don't know the significance of the TRC. To end before I begin, The TRC, in my judgment, brought relative sanity in the nation. People did not run again from their country to go to another country. People did not sleep in the bush. But they came together to say, government, we are here to know what has gone wrong. Whatever we do, we help you to change the country, to bring the country to normalcy. Young people, men and women, related their stories, horrible stories. Thank God I do not have enough time, so I do not have time to narrate all of those things here. What, in its totality, people out there told us, pardon? Yes, all right. Told us that it is not only quote-unquote fully Sanko, but even some of the big boys who are governing the country contributed to the state in which we find ourselves. And so, to help us, we all know, the special court was established. And the key pin, Prince Sanko, was arrested. The rest is story. But because of the time I have, I want to state this one for us to take along. The TRC, in my judgment, brought sanity in the country, brought people from the bushes, from the villages, brought people from where they were around the world to come back to their country, to rebuild their country. And it helps people to learn afresh what it means to be a citizen and to be of help to government, whichever government comes in. It helps the people to realize that when we are put in government, we are not put there for ourselves, but for others to serve them. Unfortunately, in Sierra Leone, I do not know from where you're coming. Some people, once they get a small position, they begin to work like this. I think they are gods. But the TRC recommended, one, the government should bring sanity in the country. The government should make sure that those who went out and want to come back to the country. All right, okay, thanks. I'm carrying up. And as a result of the TRC, which was accepted by the people, we are where we are today. Elections have come and gone. So TRC becomes a therapy to bring the lifeless to life. And if you want to get your people to live longer, then engage in TRC and be positive, be honest about it. For the people to see and then the world to see. The United Nations embraced the TRC in Sierra Leone and they provided the necessary help that was needed. I hope and pray that God will help you to live well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. One round of applause for Bishop. Ladies and gentlemen, it now gives me pleasure to hear welcome remarks from Her Excellency, the former President of the Republic of Liberia, Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Honorable Minister, Dr. Kaberuka, esteemed platform participants, fellow citizens of Liberia and Sierra Leone. It's always a great pleasure to come to Sierra Leone as Liberia because of the similarities of our two people. I'd like to commend the IGC for this report, contributed to its findings and recommendation by the local team headed by Herbert McClure, and also to commend the Commission represented here today by Dr. Donald Kaberuka. The depth and breadth of this report is something that is going to be very useful to Liberia as we look at the lessons that will be covered or has been covered by the report in trying to address similar issues of fragility in our own country. And so to all participants here, I just wish for you a time to really read this report thoroughly and look at its findings, look at the recommendations, so that each of you can make a contribution to ensure that your country move toward the sustainability of the growth and development that you've already achieved so far. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now that we have this working from here, get to the presentation of the reports now from Dr. Donald Kaberuka, who is co-chair of the Fragility Commission, the former president of the African Development Bank.
Madam President, Excellencies, dear ministers, friends, I'm pleased to be here, and I'm going to be quite brief, very brief. A lot of things have been said, and I don't think that I know Sierra Leone more than you do. So I'll make a couple of points. I think we're more interested in hearing from you than hearing from me. But as a co-chair of this commission, which produced this report, I think it is useful to share some lessons with you. It is my fourth visit to Sierra Leone. Last time I was here during the height of the Ebola crisis. I came here to see the president, the people, went on to Liberia. It was a period which has stuck in my mind for a long, long time. Because I recall I even had trouble getting here. Because at the time there was not even a flight coming to Freetown. I recall we had to charter a flight, got a plane from Angola somewhere, to try to come here. But I came here nonetheless. Then went on to Freetown to see the president, to Liberia. That was my fourth visit. But I've always wondered, as someone who comes from a country myself which has gone through issues, I've always wondered about this region, the Manu River area. I've always wondered because this area, speaking, should be one of the most successful regions of Africa. It had early access to education, very wealthy natural resources, talented people, not landlocked. The country I come from, we're 2,000 kilometers from the sea. We are 12 million people in an area of 26,000 square kilometers, almost a third of Sierra Leone. And so I'm not here to tell you that I know the solution. I'm only saying to you that a friend, as an African, I've always wondered, because the Mano River area has never been invaded by an external force. It has not been engaged in a war against a foreign country, a foreign occupying power. The challenges have been largely internal to the region. And therefore, it is not surprising that the first conclusion we draw in this commission is that the solutions will have to be internal, because the problems are internal. If this country, if this region had been invaded from outside, you could say we have to look at an external solution. But this region has not been invaded. It is one of the wealthiest regions in terms of many of the resources for which the world is looking for today. And therefore, I dare to say, under the control of Minister of Finance here, I know that translating natural resources into tangible wealth is something else. But even the resources are here to transform this region. But I also want to salute the social resilience. I'm saying social resilience, not state resilience. The people of this region, in spite of the challenges, have been able to survive somehow, even when the state has completely broken down. And that is something worth saluting. As the minister was saying, you have gone through a couple of transitions and steadily rebuilding your economy. And that is something you can build upon. But let me also say something else, that I fundamentally believe, and this report says so, fragility can be overcome. It all depends upon the people and the leaders. It can be overcome. And in this one, you're not alone. Many other countries have gone through this or worse and have come through. And in overcoming these challenges, there's no prototype, there's no model. Don't look outside for a model, a country to copy from. It does not exist. The solutions are here, and there will be local solutions. Now, if you don't believe what I'm saying, that fragility can be overcome, there's a book I was reading recently. Its title is A Savage Continent. You can Google it later. A Savage Continent. And when I was at Kennedy School, I used to teach my students. I would show them the title, A Savage Continent, and ask them, which continent is this? And invariably, they would say, this is Africa. The truth is, that book is about Europe after 1945. Millions dead, economy destroyed, refugees, displaced persons. Europe was the most fragile continent on planet Earth after 1945. It took them years to recover. And I don't want to go there. They did many things to normalize. Asia, after 1979. You remember Cambodia? You remember Vietnam? Latin America in the mid-80s. Macroeconomic crisis, military putsch, hyperinflation. I recall visiting Brazil, and the currency would change almost month to month. So I want to say to you, or the Balkans even, or even the Middle East. So you are not alone. There's nothing specific here. these things have happened elsewhere and have been able to overcome. Now we're facing issues in the Sahel, in the Horn of Africa, parts of the Great Lakes, and the world has issues in Syria and Yemen, Afghanistan, and other places. So fragility is an issue, as Professor Ada was saying, which the whole world has to overcome, because there are more people living in fragile situations, there are more countries, and solutions which have been deployed so far are not delivering. They are not delivering for many reasons, because non-state actors, rebel movements and so on, can still challenge the state. Some governments, some states are not able to deliver basic services. A number of states going to show very limited resilience to even small shocks. There are deep divisions in societies, with one side blaming the other, blaming history. And in some cases, governments lack legitimacy in the eyes of the people. In many cases, all these things are combined into one. So I want to say to you that this issue and its spillovers is at the heart of the challenges we're facing today in many parts of Africa and that of the world. I said I want to be brief because you know more than I do. So I'll take a few minutes to share with you why we think we have gone wrong and what could be some of the solutions. Where we have gone wrong is that in many instances we have thought that the external solutions will bring us to the solution we want. It has not happened. When it happened, it is very temporary. But even worse, we thought that when external solutions come with the money, it is even better because we are going to have the money and the solutions. And that too has not happened. Does anybody in this room believe that when time comes to rebuild Libya, Libya will lack money? They'll be pumping 2 million barrels of oil per day. So the chances are they will not need anybody's money. They'll have enough of their own. So we have believed that external solutions, and better still, external solutions with external money will resolve our issues. I hope, Minister of Finance, you really don't believe that when donors come here with money and solutions, I hope you stand your ground. You may have to be in a position sometimes of saying to some of them, I'm sorry, you can keep your money, because I don't think the solution you're giving me will work here. And also, I hope some donors in this room will be humble enough to say, I may have the money, but I don't have the solutions. In that case, either I want to help the country with their own solutions, or I keep my money. But you can't have both. And it is a choice the country will have to make. It is not an easy choice, but it's a choice you will have to make. Number two, at the end of the day, it's no longer about donors. I think the days of donors are diminishing. We're entering the days where wealth is created through investment, through people putting risk capital on the table. And so rather than wasting time in the government, my dear ministers, with donors, perhaps you were better off spending a lot of time talking to investors, Sierra Leone investors, Sierra Leonean, regional investors, and foreign investors. But the first thing they will ask for is, where is security? You may be very wealthy, but physical security for them, security for their assets, is number one thing they will ask for. And therefore, one of the things this report says is that the ability of the nation to secure its people security is fundamental for job creation. We're no longer in the area of having armies to defend our borders, because there's no foreign threat. The threat to security is internal. Division in society, lack of cohesion. That is what prevents foreign investors coming. South Sudan has not been invaded by any country, but has huge challenges to its security, and therefore huge challenges to investment, to jobs and growth. And that security is not a function of the size of the army. It's a function of the nature of the security forces. Now, Madam President and I were at a seminar recently in Italy, and we were discussing with other people what kind of security forces we need. Do we still need armies, which we had in those days, to defend our borders? Or we need a new type of security forces to actually support citizenry in ensuring security in the country? In any case, security is not simply about military or paramilitary forces. It's about stable societies, stakeholder societies, where everybody feels they have something to protect. When everybody believes they have something to protect, that is the number one element of security. It is about no group in the country should feel that they will be permanent losers from any electoral outcome. Just look around Africa today, a number of countries who go through an election, and the moment the election is over, they begin to plan for the next election. First of all, there is contestation of the outcome, often violent contestation, because some groups believe they have not only lost the election, but they will lose the next election, and the next election, maybe the next election. So they have not lost an election, they are permanent losers. When they are permanent losers, who have no chance of believing they have a next chance, you have a problem. It is about a country having what you call a national project. A national project is something for which we may have differences, political differences, difference of approach, but there is a national project we defend for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So that after an election, we're not planning for the next election. We're there to defend the national project. Let me give you a simple example, and I'll be in my last 1 minute. You see, there's a story about President Kennedy going to Cape Canaveral. Maybe Jonathan, you know the story. And he's walking around, he asks people, so what did you do? Oh, this one says, I'm an engineer. This one says, I'm the manager. This one says, I am maybe some kind of expert. And then he comes to a lady who was helping with coffee and tea. So what do you do? The lady says, I'm helping put an American on the moon. She did not describe her job as, I'm helping making tea here. She was part of a larger project to put an American on the moon. She was aware this project may take 5, 10, 20, 30 years, but it is a national project. She may have been a Democrat, she may have been a Republican, or even none of the two. But she believed in the national project. Security, stability is about a country which has a national project. So if I ask here to my friends from Sierra Leone, because I'm a friend, or Liberians, or Burundians, and others, what is a national project? A national project is not a beautiful document called Sierra Leone Vision 2050. No, that's not a national project. That's the summary of aspects of national project. And incidentally, often, because of the absence of a national project, those kind of sophisticated visions suffer from vision to execution. Because precisely they are not a national project. But if they are a national project, the chances of vision to execution being realized is very, very high. So, my friends from Sierra Leone, I'm saying this to you because I'm a friend, and in my job as former president of the African Development Bank, I travel a lot around this continent. And what I'm saying to you, feel free to say it anywhere else. You may feel unhappy with me, don't invite me again, that's fine. But I'll have told you what I think I should tell you. So 2 more points about security. You see, in 1962, the first peacekeeping force was in the Congo, in the DRC. There are challenges post-independence. Today, they still have a United Nations peacekeeping force. It costs $1 billion a year. Now, I am humble enough, I've not worked in these areas, but I want to tell you that peacekeepers will give you a small window to put down the fires, to sort out the issues, but they are not a solution to your long-term security. They are a very expensive short-term solution, and not a solution for the long-term either. And so there are conversations going on now to see whether these resources are not best used to actually help countries build the type of security forces they should have. I don't know what would be in Sierra Leone, but this is a conversation you must have. What kind of security forces you need? We need to discuss further with our friends in the international community, because often as they come with a lot of money, they're also looking at democracy institutions as they have known them in their country. You can't blame them. This is what they know as democracy. But it might be that in our countries, working together, not simply governments, government, citizenry, business, everyone, a conversation of what type of institutions do you actually need. Now, those institutions may not look the ones in Norway, but there will be institutions which we understand and which we accept. They may be imperfect, but they evolve over time. Again, Madam Ministers, I have been surprised by, there are 2 countries which Madam President knows very well. Perfect multi-party election on the Western model. Perfect. The next day after the election, riots in the streets. Right? People die. Property is destroyed. People feel marginalized. And they wait for the next election. That can't be right. It means there's something broken, which has to be fixed. I don't know what it is, but it means something has to be fixed. And often, I think, as our friends in the donor community, when they want to see systems as they've known them, it is a lack of modesty, because in their own history they have gone through issues. In many European countries, women could not vote up to not a long time ago. All right? In my lifetime, well, I've retired, so I'm not a young man, but as a young person, there's some big countries in the world where black people had no voice. So all of us around the world, we're struggling with the same issues. How to create fair societies where we govern for everyone. How we govern for everyone is for every society to decide. And that is this conclusion. So let me say that in a country like Sierra Leone, or mine, or even others, it is quite often to express our grievances as a zero-sum game. It is the fault of that group, that region, that tribe, that ethnic group. The chances are they are saying the same thing. But it is possible to get in a spot where I say, very good, history is history. A famous European leader used to say that borders, things which divide us, are like the scars of history. As you can see, I've injured myself. Believe me, not the fault of Sierra Leone, it's my own fault. I probably have a scar when I leave. I won't like it, all right? But then I have to overcome it, won't I? The challenges our nations face are the same. These are scars we have to live with. And move on to build something new together. So, this report which you have in front of you will tell you what we think should happen in terms of jobs, the economy, security, reasonable timelines, it takes what it takes, how we can use donor money to de-risk things for investors. We don't think there are enough tools now to actually, instead of giving money as close the envelope, to actually use this little money to de-risk investors so that investors can bring real capital. But that's where money is. There are suggestions on how to take pivotal moments, like you have had in Sierra Leone, excellent for the last few years. Successful elections, rebuilding the economy. So you could not have had a better time to begin to come together and put the past behind you. And my dear Sierra Leoneans, let me stop by saying this. When I was at school, I had 2 Sierra Leone friends. This was in Scotland. And our conversation always ended up on diamonds. How Sierra Leone is blessed with diamonds. Okay. So one of them went to see this film called Diamonds Are what? Well, I used to tell him, diamonds actually is not forever. So think of Sierra Leone without diamonds. Think of countries doing quite well without nothing under the soil. Often doing better than those with a lot under the soil. Because what you have under the soil is something you inherited from God, Allah. That is all. But the real wealth is here in your brains. And I think that's what you have to develop. I was looking at the numbers here. Minister, you may help me maybe to remind me. The share of national wealth invested in education in this country between the 70s, 80s, 90s, I think it is one of the most dramatic declines among the African economies ever. It might be very low and rising. But here, for the period I was looking at, it was already modest and declining over time. That was a huge mistake. It is time to say diamonds are fine, they're helping. Maybe they may be forever, I don't know. But the real wealth is in the people. Because when those diamonds are gone, the solutions will be found by the people. And I do believe that you're on the right path. I think this report gives you some of the solutions. Not all of them are applicable. There are no prototypes, but they'll inspire you to work around some of the challenges you face. I want to thank you and happy to answer your questions or to come back in the future. That is, if you want to invite me. But if you don't, that is fine too. We can meet somewhere else to share our experiences. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think you will have a permanent entry visa for Sierra Leone. Don't worry. No visa fee. Thank you. And now we'll call on a brother here, Herbert McCoy, to talk about the Sierra Leone case study.
Chairman, Excellency, former President of Liberia, and my former boss. She's a tough boss, I can tell you, but it's a pleasure to work with. Distinguished participants, all protocols observed. Here in Sierra Leone, we are very proud of our religious tolerance. Many Muslims cite the Bible more accurately than professed Christians. And many Christians have Muslim wives and relatives. I'm a Christian, I have a Muslim sister. Mixed marriages among ethnic groups are common. And even at the time of the conflict, no one tribe pitted itself against another. We are therefore blessed that inter-ethnic animosity is rare and often short-lived, appearing mainly during elections. We have traditional institutions that have endured marginalization, attempts at modifications, and weakened by urbanization and modern life. Yet, when the state collapsed during the conflict, it was traditional societies. That's when they displayed their resilience to become the bastion for protection of the citizens from the rebels. It's also well known that when modern medicine fails, people turn to traditional medicine. The point is not whether that works or not. It is that citizens resort to it when all else have failed. They turn to what they believe in, where they have their trust. So we have a number of pride, achievements, and potentially positive attributes that we take for granted. The current state of the development of the country can be improved considerably. The severity of our development condition, despite over 50 years of independence, argue for a thorough evaluation of why, and even important, how we can change this condition. This report is an attempt at a comprehensive diagnosis of our condition as a basis for deciding on what could be durable solutions. If you have headache and fever and you do not diagnose the root causes, you could take Tylenol. You will feel good for a couple of hours, but if your real problem is malaria, you will not solve it. You will get it again. So it's absolutely essential that we go to the root causes of our current situation. What we have done in the report is to use the framework offered by Fragility for this diagnosis, drawing from the vast amounts of analysis already done, sifting through empirical evidence, and observing the trajectory of the country since its promulgation as a country. We looked at our condition from the perspective of, one, the legitimacy of the state, and note that the hybrid of governance systems that are in existence, this hybrid has fundamental consequences ranging from trust of the citizenry to corruption and abuse of power. Two, we looked at the capacity of the state, and we noted that the inability to deliver basic social services and manage the economy efficiently limits significantly poverty reduction measures, and therefore improve instability and lead to inequality. We also looked at the security apparatus, and we observed that the security apparatus has not succeeded to maintain a degree of credibility and trust needed for the operation of the rule of law. As a child, when there are quarrels, you say, I'll take you go court, I'll take you to court. These days, when you see people catch a thief, they beat him up. Nobody wants to go and waste time in the police. That tells you the level of confidence that people have. We looked at the private sector, and we traced the pre-conflict state of the private sector as reproduced now after the conflict, where, as reported by the TRC, it was used as an instrument to loot state resources. And finally, we looked at the question of resilience. Why is it that resilience is evading us? Here, the economic structure that was basically extractive, right from the word go, it was mainly set up to extract natural resources to the north. And if it was even exploitative, that structure has remained, has continued. Our patterns of production and trade have remained virtually intact, except for recent diversification of trade to the east, mainly Southeast Asia. That nature has remained essentially the same. We have not been able to exploit the sub-regional opportunities and improve the costs and diversity of production within the region, but we remain essentially the same. Now, we found an alarming degree of continuity in the pattern of development going back to colonial times. From the perspective of social organization, governance at the national level, the role of the private sector, the capacity of the state to deliver services, the judiciary, security, and above all, the structure of the economy. This pattern has not changed. So when there is a boom in primary product prices, because that structure was geared towards primary products, whether it's agriculture, mining, whatever the case may be, whenever there is a boom in product prices and money somehow flows inequitably through the economy, we experience a short-lived sense of hope. But as the cycle of commodity prices begin their downward thrust, the fault lines appear, tensions mount, and instability resurfaces. This situation is exacerbated by our objective conditions. We're a small country, and we're in a neighborhood of small countries, equally poor. Now, opinions differ as to how this can be changed, primarily in terms of what the priorities should be and how best to proceed. Similarly, the response to the question why elicits different responses. Relatedly, the question of why the country is unable to manage and to bounce back from crisis decidedly is important because of the fear of relapse to conflict or state failure. All of this confirm the need for a national agenda, one that is quite different from a political agenda, one that allows us to have the discourse that we need to face what I call our demons. How do we, for instance, reinforce our traditional systems so that they become modern and powerful, not abusive, and we do not create, in the attempt to deal with decentralized government, create other forms of governance that undermine that policy, that undermine, in consequence, the state. Before I close and pass on to my colleague, I just want to say a word on state legitimacy, why it is important. If you look at the United Kingdom, there is a monarchy. They have succeeded in modernizing. When I say modernizing, I don't want to say marginalizing, but modernizing the role of that monarchy so that essentially you have one governance system in the UK. When you go to Nigeria or Ghana, if you go to see the Asantehene and you are the president of that country, whether of Ghana, when you see the regalia and the entire sophistication surrounding that system, you recognize that you have two governance systems. The same when you go to Nigeria. When you go to Nigeria, if you go to the Sultan of Sokoto, this is a completely different story. The kind of respect, trust that have been honed in by generations of culture, of tradition, and religion is so strong that you have a very cohesive state, but that state is operating within another state and therefore rendering some incohesion, as it were. We need to think through how we can avoid this, how we can create a situation where we have one state. The consequences of having one state is quite enormous. Let me pass on to my colleague, who would, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, Your Excellencies, fellow researchers and analysts, because we're all here as researchers and analysts here this morning. The question that's left to me from the Sierra Leone report is, how can there be so much continuity from the past to the present in Sierra Leone? Why do we see shadows of dynamics that we recognize as problematic that have endured over decades? And I think the starting point has to be to put to rest one possible diagnosis that's hanging out there, because I think in situations like this we're sometimes tempted to ask ourselves, do people really want to change? Are they willing to change? Is this a lack of will or of trying? And I think in Sierra Leone's case we can very safely say empirically that is not true. There have been substantial, meaningful change efforts all along the way. Our analysis builds on the shoulders of giants who commissioned and led the TRC work, which is still a global benchmark for honest self-reflection by a nation coming out of conflict. My first time in Sierra Leone in 2010 was to evaluate a local peace-building effort that we still use in our teaching as a benchmark for locally led partner-supported efforts to manage and resolve conflicts under very difficult circumstances. I have the privilege of working with colleagues here in Sierra Leone from the IFC, the African Development Bank, who wake up every day thinking not only about how do we grow the economy, but how do we foster peaceful development. So the problem isn't lack of trying. It's not lack of necessarily understanding the problem. We need to turn our minds to understanding why it is that change is why we have not escaped from fragility. And the report gives us a number of entry points for beginning to wrestle with that question. First of all, recognizing that we need to break out of a post-conflict recovery frame to one that takes a broader historical perspective. It is not helpful to think of fragility as something that is the result of conflict, but more helpful to see conflict as the result of fragility and factors of fragility that may endure. The report focuses often on enduring fault lines in society that we saw exemplified in early history between the colony and the protectorate, that endure in center-periphery tensions between different levels of government, between formal and informal or traditional sources of authority, which play themselves out in inter-ethnic mistrust at a political level. And what we see is that these enduring fault lines, there's evidence that they continue to infect our national institutions and even our efforts to reform the way we live and work together, that a particular investment may too easily still be seen as a source of personal benefit, as our chance to get our benefit rather than a national project, that it was reported that anti-corruption efforts can easily be infected by a mindset of consolidating power, of punishing our enemies, of protecting our own, in ways that retard our progress. And to get past this, the report starts to dig into some insights about how can this be? How can it be that the past remains such a strong factor in the present? And it recognizes that our strengths can sometimes also be our weaknesses, that the power of institutions to protect people, to provide basic needs through the worst times of history, from periods of neglect, when the protectorate was not particularly caring about human development and the progress of the people, through the conflict. The traditional institutions in which people have faith and which have protected them are at the same time not been brought into a present, as this global analysis pointed out. They have not been given an opportunity to modernize so that they together can bring all of us forward. There are limited ability for them to work together, other sources of strength, other sources of resilience, using that just as the leading example. And that means that whether we are looking at the historical period of the marriage of the colony and the protectorate, an arranged marriage perhaps, or whether we are looking at the political accommodations after the Lomé Accords, the social contract, I think it's fair to say, has not been deeply established. We have not, as a society, grappled with the costs and benefits and risks of how we move forward and how we decide together. There is still a mismatch between the structures and processes which create trust and safety, economic security, having our voices heard, and the formal structures of government. And that leads to the kinds of enduring challenges that we've seen. I'm going to stop here because often good research is not about answers, it's about putting a better question on the table. And I think for me, revisiting what I've learned about Sierra Leone in the past and working with so many people here to analyze and see what the paths are to open forward, that's the question I'd like to leave us with from the report that we offer to all of you who are struggling with these issues as well, which is very simply, how do we change the dance? How do we not listen to the same music and dance the same dance from here going forward? How do we find new approaches to building sufficient consensus for progress, whether that's at a micro level around a particular investment project, whether that is a macro level around our health policy. How is it that we are going to bring that thinking into everything we do? Are we playing the old game, or are we laying sounder, stronger foundations, as we were reminded in the chairman's introductions, for a better future? And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, getting now to the point where my role is fast diminishing, because we're getting to the town hall interview with Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former President of the Republic of Liberia, and Donald Kaberuka here, and contending with fragility experience from Liberia and Rwanda. And the interviewer will be Dr. Chukwu Imaka, and questions will be taken from the audience. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. You can come to your talk from here. It's fine.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I want to be accused of unseating you. We have been warned. These are the kinds of things that the IG is not too keen on. So I want to keep.
I wasn't expecting that line, but seriously, I think I need to closure because it's interview questions. That's why, instead of being so far from High Excellency. Okay. Yeah, it's fine here. It's center because you're dealing with them. I'm fine. So you are forgiven. No warrant issued.
Good morning, colleagues. All due protocols observed. You will see from the agenda that I have been described as Dr. Chukwuemeka. I want you to know that miracles happen. I went to bed as Chukwuemeka. I have woken up as Doctor. You do not need to spend 7 years doing a PhD. All you need to do is be assigned by the IGC to these kinds of tasks. My name is Chukwuemeka Chikezie, Chuk's for short, a multi-sim Sierra Leonean. It's my honor, it's my pleasure to be here this morning. And we have had, I think, a wealth of ideas and suggestions already. I think what we want to do now is to build further on those by drawing on the lessons or the experience of two very eminent persons we're very privileged to have them. I don't think they need any introduction. They have been introduced. So I want to jump straight in. And the format, just to be very clear, will be, as moderator, I'll ask a couple of questions, but this is actually a town hall. We will be inviting contributions and questions from the audience. We are going to go for, we don't want any fragility, so we are going to have regional balance in the questions. This is the north, this is the west, this is the south, this is the east. We will be having a very balanced discussion and very diverse as we go along. Our guests, one from Liberia, one from Rwanda, have made it very clear they have not come to comment on the political issues of the day. They do not want to leave the country any more confused and divided than we already are. They're helping us to have a conversation, to answer the question which has already been put on the table. What is our national project? How do we move forward? How do we change the dance, as has been put? So in that light, and they are both, as you know, very seasoned leaders. So we will not be asking them questions that will maybe stop them from leaving the country this afternoon. They would like to live in peace, so we will not be asking any questions of that sort. Of course, we will put to one side. But questions around how we move forward, how we change our narrative, those are the kind of questions and that we want to do. So without further ado, let me first come to Madam President. And Madam President, you recently received an award from the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and we congratulate you on that. And during that, indeed, I think it deserves a round of applause. And during your acceptance speech, Madam President, you did let on that you will soon be 80. And I wondered whether you could start by sharing with us, what if you had to write a letter to your 66-year-old self, just as you took the presidency, and as you said, to navigate the challenging waters of Liberia's development, what would be some of the things, with the benefit of hindsight now, that you would write to your younger self in how you navigated those challenging and choppy waters? Just share with us, if you will, some of the things that you might have put in such a letter, now writing to your 66-year-old self.
Did you say 6-year-old or 66-year-old? Well, I would say to my son or to any other one to stay with their principles, to stay the course in whatever goals they have set for themselves, to ensure that they remain focused on those things they would like to achieve, and don't be distracted by all the challenges and obstructions that they would face. And I hope that having reached that far in life, they've already established themselves along the lines of those principles.
Thank you. You talked about the need for a national leadership system in leading Liberia. Can you tell us more about that? Because we tend to think of the one individual, but you talked about a whole system of leadership. And I think that's something that we need to also think about and understand. Could you share with us your thoughts on the national leadership system that you had in mind, or what you used to drive change in Liberia?
Simply put, I talked about the institutionalization of the political system that removes it away from the personality cult to one in which it's an institution that cuts across the leadership structure, that has a body that not only sustains itself, but is able to compete effectively as an institution. Simply put, that's all I was saying.
Simply put, I'm sure much more challenging to implement, and maybe you'll tell us about that. But let me come to Dr. Kaberuka. You shared a story yesterday, talking to donors, how your country, when you were the finance minister, engaged the British government, and in that process, you were able to put one page of the priorities that Rwanda had at the time. How, when you think of your country at the time, you think of Sierra Leone, where everything is a priority, and our leaders have to balance all of these. How did the leadership, the Rwandan leadership, come to a clear set of priorities that were to shape and drive the country towards resilience and away from fragility?
Thank you. First of all, let me say that Rwanda is not Sierra Leone. And you cannot transpose any country's problem, ecosystem, approach to another country. It's just not possible. But since you have asked me the questions of how we looked at it, I'm just sharing, not in any way suggesting that it's workable here, but there might even be better examples here in Sierra Leone. I did mention a while ago that we're a very small country, a third of the size of Sierra Leone. I think if my numbers are right, this country is about 76,000 square kilometers. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. So we are 26,000 square kilometers. We are 2,000 kilometers away from the sea. 12 million people. Not much natural resources. Double landlocked, with a complex history. So everything was ranged against us, and we just lost 1 million people dead. And so, in that kind of crisis, you have to think of what comes first and where you want to go. Now, we had clarity of what we want to do, but the most important clarity was that it depended on us. Truth be told, we turned away a number of partners with whom we did disagree, because we found that their agendas were overloaded, front-loaded. We didn't have the capacity. So if partners asked us to do things which, truthfully, we realized we could not do, because we didn't have the capacity, we said, thank you very much. That is all. But then when our partners will say, look, we believe in you, it's your country, these are your priorities, we don't share all of them, but we share some, and this is what we're prepared to do together. That is the context in which we negotiate these agreements. So what would be those things? Do you believe in macroeconomic stabilization? Of course we do. Do you believe in gradually building institutions of the state which create confidence? Of course we do. Those kind of things, not very complicated. Are you going to be a perfect Western democracy? Well, we are very clear that there is a long-run project, but it could not happen the next day. Not after a death of 1 million people, when you have a wounded country and you have to sort out those issues. So that kind of frank conversation with partners is what you need. But the most important conversation, sir, is not with the British or the donors. The most important conversation is internal. Because focusing too much on the donors, on the outside world, that is completely the wrong focus. Your focus is internal, your own people. Because once you create confidence internally, they know that you don't have enough resources to handle all their needs in education, health. But they know, A, that you are governing for everyone, not for some, that you are a fair government, that you are an accountable government, and above all, you not steal with money. They will understand that you cannot resolve everything. But if you govern for some, not all, if you're not fair to everybody, if some people are treated with favoritism in terms of taxation, if government money is paid for, then you're undermining the confidence. It does not matter how much you talk to outsiders, the World Bank, the IMF, the African Bank, the British. The most important conversation has been missed. So I think the most important thing I want to leave you is that the conversation was mainly internal and not between us and the foreign people.
I think that's very helpful. Thank you. By show of hands, can we just see how many people have questions? Does anybody have a question to Madam President and to Dr. Kaberuka? Do we have any questions so far? Okay, I see the West. Fine. We'll take a couple of those questions and then we'll have our guests respond. I'll ask you to make your question very brief. Please say your name, whichever institution. There's a comment. Again, make it very brief, please. So we'll take 2 or 3, and then we'll have a second round. I see Batiloy as one person. Do we have a roving mic? What I will do is I will point, I won't have the mic, and I will point to the person. So after Mr. Wairete, I'll point to the next person. Please, you watch me, I direct you where the mic goes.
Good morning all. Your Excellency, Dr. Kaberuka, Honorable members of the High Table. Just 2 questions. Firstly, our nation has struggled with the idea of being willing to open up a discussion, especially around the issue of traditional systems. And I think part of that has come as a result of earlier fault lines that have been described interestingly by Brian. How does one begin a discussion where there is suspicion between ethnic groups and there is also an unwillingness to still accept that traditional systems have a role to play other than the cosmetic roles that they're playing at the moment? That's one question I have. The second question I have is that we live in a country where professionals find it very difficult to work together. And because education for a long time was rubbish, there has been a situation where education is not given that much of an importance, although these days the situation is changing. But how do you develop dialogue amongst intellectuals, which seemingly is very limited in our country at the moment? How do we develop dialogue between intellectuals? We have very little or few think tanks. intellectuals hardly really dialogue amongst themselves, apart from individuals. How does one develop that? Any of the two guests may answer.
We'll take this one, and then a show of hands will then take another couple. But first of all, Dr. Kaberuka will pick up on these.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. I think we don't have to worry too much that we are a diverse society. Every society on the planet has its own diversity. Different religions, faith, different ethnic compositions, different regions, all forms of diversity. Diversity can be considered as a problem or as a source of wealth. There's no society we know today which is not diverse. But since you seem to think that is a problem, think about Somalia. The war in Somalia began in 1990, almost at the same time as troubles in this region. Somalis are one ethnic group, if you want, one religion. They speak one language. But it has been the most intractable problem Africa has faced since independence. And along the way, they have no longer been considering themselves as Somalis. They've found even smaller groups, they call them clans. So, whether you have a diverse society and you want to make it a base for living together, wealth, or a source of division, is where the issue lies. Are the British one people? Ask them, they have Scots, they have Welsh, they have all kinds of people. Are the Americans the same? I don't know. Every society is diverse. And you have to learn how to deal with diversity. And you do so by having governments that govern for all, that are fair to everyone, men and women, different faith or no faith, different regions. It's an issue of institutions and governance. I do not think that the description of Africa as a place where all the conflicts are ethnic based is the right one. It isn't. It's a definition of us by other people. Just keep thinking about Somalia again. It was a region which should have been stable from that perspective. It should have been Somalia. One language, one religion, one history, one people. Now, as for a second point about education, I referred a while ago to the numbers I've seen for Sierra Leone. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was explaining to me. In the mid-70s, this country was spending about 18.7% of its budget on education. 18.7%. By mid-80s, it had fallen to 8%. And of course, population was increasing. And just before the civil war here, it has fallen down to 4%. These numbers, maybe could be having them wrong by percentage here and there, but roughly that is up in this country. Population is increasing, but spending on the education of people declining in such a dramatic way. For me, that's what the issue is. But otherwise, Sierra Leone has been a base for education for a very long time. People in this country valued education, deployed education. Sierra Leoneans were some of the highly skilled people in this continent. So education was valued here. But I do think the decline in spending on education was something which governments today have to try and reverse and do better than the past.
You know, as president, having inherited a collapsed economy and dysfunctional institution, I concentrated on what we call the hard areas, the restoration of infrastructure and institutions. But I failed to address the soft issues, values, attitudes, a recognition of our historical situation. Perhaps Sierra Leone may face those same circumstances, and those things need to be addressed. Dependency, indiscipline, integrity issues, political concentration. Those are the soft issues that sometimes we leaders don't pay attention to. And I say that they, in Liberia, perhaps in Sierra Leone, as you try to get out of the fragility trap, you will want to look into those and see how they can be addressed.
Thank you. I think some really useful insights there. I don't think we've done justice to Bachelor's question, which is about the dialogue among intellectuals, but also how we, among intellectuals. So we'll keep that in mind. And also the role of traditional society. Let us hear from our young sister here from Liberia. Please.